The business card for the culinary program remained on the miller's refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a chef's hat, a gift from Mr. Gonzalez. As winter melted into spring, Sarah found herself studying it more frequently, particularly on days when Ethan showed interest in helping prepare meals. His motor skills had improved significantly with his latest round of therapy, and cooking seemed to help his concentration. "Chef Ethan has a nice ring to it," David remarked one evening, watching their son carefully measure ingredients for the family's dinner. They had installed adaptive kitchen tools, specialized cutting boards with stabilizers, ergonomic utensils, a rolling chair at counter height, transforming their kitchen into a space where Ethan could participate safely. The incident with Veronica had faded from national attention, but its effects rippled outward in unexpectedly positive ways. 3 neighboring HOAs had contacted Mr. Chen about implementing their own versions of the Ethan Protocol. A state representative had introduced legislation strengthening protections for individuals with disabilities in community governance settings, informally known as Ethan's Law. Veronica herself had virtually disappeared from public life. Her social media accounts went dormant shortly after her final court appearance. The realtor who handled her home sale mentioned she'd relocated to Arizona, where her sister lived. The only communication from her was a court-mandated apology letter that arrived precisely on the deadline set by the judge. 3 terse paragraphs of carefully worded contrition that stopped just short of admitting deliberate wrongdoing. "At least she spelled his name correctly this time," Sarah had commented dryly before filing the letter away. The house Veronica vacated was purchased by a young couple with twins on the autism spectrum. Their relief at finding a neighborhood with explicit disability accommodation policies was palpable during the welcome gathering the HOA hosted for new residents. "We've been rejected from 3 communities because of concerns about property values," the father explained, the exhaustion of past battles evident in his voice. "Finding out about your inclusivity initiatives felt too good to be true." For Ethan, the healing process continued in fits and starts. The therapist had warned them that trauma rarely resolves in a straight line. Some days were harder than others. Loud noises could still trigger anxiety, and he remained wary of unfamiliar adults who approached suddenly. But there were more good days than bad ones now. The most significant breakthrough came during a school presentation. Ethan's class had been assigned to speak about someone who inspires me. Many chose athletes or celebrities. Ethan chose Mrs. Chen. "She didn't let someone be mean to me even though that person was important," he explained in his careful, measured speech. "She showed me that having power means helping people who need it." Mrs. Chen, invited to attend the presentation, had wiped away tears as Ethan carefully navigated his wheelchair to present her with a hand-drawn certificate declaring her the most brave principal. The Saturday of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and cool. Sarah helped Ethan select his judging outfit, a button-down shirt with planets on it, and his least worn jeans. David attached a small GoPro to Ethan's wheelchair at his request. He wanted to document his first official community role for posterity, a phrase he'd recently learned and used at every opportunity. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked as they approached the festival grounds. Ethan considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "A little. But Mr. Chen said judges are supposed to be honest, not perfect." The judging platform had been constructed with meticulous attention to detail, the ramp at precisely the right angle for wheelchair access, a special table height for Ethan's comfort, even a discreet quiet space behind the judge's table with sensory tools if he needed a break. What struck Sarah most powerfully wasn't the physical accommodations, impressive as they were. It was the way no one made a fuss about them. They weren't presented as special concessions or highlighted as extraordinary efforts. They were simply there, integrated into the event planning as naturally as the tables and chairs. Ethan's needs considered from the beginning, rather than addressed as an afterthought. "Ready, Your Honor?" he asked with a formal bow that made Ethan giggle. Sarah stepped back, allowing her son his moment of independence. She caught David's eye across the crowd. He was pretending to polish a trophy with exaggerated importance, making Ethan laugh harder. The simple joy of that moment, her family, whole and healing, embraced by their community, felt like a victory more profound than any court could provide. As Officer Ramirez created a protective space around Ethan, Sarah worked through their practice calming routine. Mr. Gonzalez returned with the emergency kit, and Sarah draped the weighted blanket over Ethan's shoulders. The familiar pressure began to work almost immediately, his rocking slowing. She slipped the noise-canceling headphones over his ears, blocking out the cacophony of raised voices. "Focus on 3 things you can feel," she whispered, their grounding ritual. "The blanket, the chair, my hand." Across the lawn, Officer Jensen was attempting to take Veronica's statement, but her narrative kept shifting. First, she insisted she'd barely touched the burger. Then, she claimed Ethan had lunged forward into her hand. Finally, she pivoted to arguing that as HOA president, she had authority to enforce community standards. "Ma'am, HOA regulations don't supersede assault laws," Officer Jensen explained patiently, though her notepad reflected the contradictions in Veronica's account. "And our body cameras are recording this conversation, so I suggest you be careful about changing your statement." The mention of body cameras sent a visible ripple through Veronica's demeanor. Her 2 friends exchanged glances, subtly creating distance between themselves and their formerly revered leader. Meanwhile, the videos were already spreading. Mrs. Patel's 16-year-old daughter had live-streamed the entire incident to her surprisingly large social media following. The Johnsons' nanny, a law student, had methodically recorded from multiple angles. Even Mr. Chen, ever the meticulous documenter, had activated the park's security cameras remotely from his phone when the commotion began. "The victim is a minor with a documented disability," Officer Ramirez explained to his sergeant over the radio, using precise terminology that would ensure the case received appropriate priority. "We have multiple witnesses and video evidence." The sergeant's voice crackled back. "The DA's office is already getting calls. They want this handled by the book." David overheard this exchange and felt a complex wave of emotions. Part of him wanted justice, wanted Veronica to face serious consequences. Another part dreaded the ordeal ahead, the statements, the court appearances, the inevitable stress on Ethan. The boy had already endured so many medical procedures, so many evaluations and appointments. Now this. "Sarah," he said softly, kneeling beside his wife and son. "We need to think about what's best for Ethan. All of this attention." Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. "I know, but we also need to make sure this doesn't happen to another child." Her nursing career had taught her that failing to report abuse only ensured its continuation. Ethan was calmer now, his breathing regulated, though his eyes remained distant. The sensory retreat was a protective mechanism, his therapist had explained. His brain, overwhelmed by input it couldn't process efficiently, had essentially pulled the emergency brake. Dr. Lopez, a neighbor and pediatrician who had been manning the desert table, approached cautiously. "I don't want to intrude," she said gently, "but I noticed the impact. Would you like me to check him over?" Sarah nodded gratefully. The informal medical assessment would strengthen their documentation. As Dr. Lopez conducted a discreet examination, Mrs. Gonzalez organized a buffer of trusted neighbors, creating a human shield around the Millers. Children were redirected to the playground with supervised activities, their parents quietly explaining that sometimes adults make terrible mistakes. The community was literally dividing before their eyes. Most clustered protectively near the Millers, but a small contingent hovered near Veronica, their faces uncertain but loyal to their social connections. The clubhouse security footage from Tuesday's meeting just finished uploading, Mr. Chen said quietly, showing his tablet to Officer Ramirez. "As you can see, Ms. Hartman's motion for plant-based events was voted down 6-1. She was instructed to incorporate diverse food options instead." Officer Ramirez nodded, adding this to his notes. "So there was no official HOA position banning meat at this event?" "None whatsoever," Mr. Chen confirmed. "In fact, we specifically discussed accommodations for residents with special dietary needs." Ms. Hartman was present for that entire conversation. The July sun beat down on the fractured gathering, the festive atmosphere thoroughly destroyed. Ice cream melted untouched on picnic tables. The bounce house deflated, forgotten in the chaos. Yet something else was inflating, a community's resolve to protect one of their vulnerable members and to hold accountable those who abuse power. Sarah tucked her phone away and tried to focus on the moment. Ethan was already beaming at Mr. Gonzalez, who was making his way toward them with a plate of his famous corn salad. "There's my favorite comedian," Mr. Gonzalez called out, his warm voice carrying across the lawn. "Ethan, I've been waiting all week to hear your new joke." Ethan's eyes lit up. He had practiced this moment for days, rehearsing the timing in front of the bathroom mirror, until Sarah had to remind him that toothpaste worked better when applied to teeth rather than near glass. "What do you call a dinosaur that crashes his car?" Ethan asked, his words carefully articulated through the speech patterns his therapist had helped him master. "I don't know. What do you call a dinosaur that crashes his car?" Mr. Gonzalez leaned in, giving Ethan his complete attention. "A Tyrannosaurus blue or case." Ethan delivered the punchline with perfect timing, dissolving into giggles that Sarah hadn't heard enough of lately. Mr. Gonzalez's hearty laugh echoed across the park. "That's the best one yet. Mind if I steal it for my grandkids?" The interaction warmed Sarah's heart. Not everyone in the neighborhood had the patience to engage with Ethan the way Mr. Gonzalez did. The retired history teacher had moved in across the street shortly after Ethan's diagnosis and had somehow known instinctively how to connect with the boy who struggled with social cues. David returned from the grill with his own plate. "The Johnson twins are setting up water balloons by the fence," he told Ethan. "They were asking if you might want to join after lunch." This was a milestone. The twins had initially been uncertain around Ethan's wheelchair, but after Sarah had volunteered as a classroom helper and explained cerebral palsy in terms 10-year-olds could understand, the ice had begun to thaw. Across the lawn, Veronica's group had grown. She stood at the center like a queen bee, gesturing animatedly toward the Miller's table. Sarah recognized Veronica's core supporters, mostly recent transplants from the city who'd purchased homes in the new luxury development adjacent to the original neighborhood. They'd arrived with premium electric vehicles and strong opinions about how Oakwood Estates should evolve. "Don't look now," David murmured, "but I think we're the main topic at the vacant summit." "Let them talk," Sarah replied, cutting Ethan's burger into manageable pieces. "I've got Dr. Ramirez's dietary plan and the school IEP in my purse if anyone has actual questions about Ethan's needs." The day was perfect otherwise, 78 degrees with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of charcoal and summer flowers. Children ran through sprinklers at the park's edge while teenagers claimed the basketball court. The Chen family had set up their annual face painting station, and Mrs. Diaz supervised a craft table where children created patriotic pinwheels. Ethan took a big bite of his burger, the protein vital for his muscle development. His physical therapist had been thrilled with his progress since adjusting his diet. Sarah watched him chew carefully, another skill they'd worked hard to develop, and felt a surge of pride at how far he'd come. The surgeries, the therapy sessions, the countless adaptations to their home and routines, all worth it to see him enjoying this normal moment. She didn't notice Veronica breaking away from her group until the shadow fell across their table. The woman's perfume arrived before she did, something expensive and overwhelming that immediately caused Ethan to wrinkle his nose in sensory discomfort. Enjoying the party, Veronica's voice was honeyed, but her eyes were fixed on Ethan's plate with unmistakable disapproval. The collision course was set. The silence that followed the slap seemed to stretch for eternity. A drop of ketchup slid down Ethan's shirt, marking the moment in vivid red. His lower lip quivered. The cognitive processing delay that accompanied his cerebral palsy meant his reaction came in waves. First confusion, then realization, then fear. Sarah was the first to break free from the collective shock. "You had my child," she said, her voice unnaturally calm, the same voice she used in the pediatric ICU when things went critical. "You deliberately struck my disabled son." "I did not." Veronica's denial came quickly, her voice climbing an octave. "I was aiming for the meat. If he got in the way, that's hardly my fault." David's hands curled into fists at his sides. He'd spent years in therapy learning to manage his temper, techniques he credited with saving his marriage after Ethan's diagnosis had pushed them both to breaking points. Those techniques were being tested to their limits now. You need to leave. Now. Each word was measured, controlled, but the vein pulsing in his temple betrayed the effort it took. Ethan began to rock more violently, his breathing becoming erratic. The sensory overload was escalating, too many eyes on him, the lingering sting on his cheek, the sharp smell of Veronica's perfume, the loss of his hearing aids that helped moderate sound input. His hands began their familiar flapping motion, self-soothing behavior that Sarah recognized as the precursor to a full meltdown. He's faking. Veronica rolled her eyes dramatically. My sister's kid does this exact routine when he doesn't get his way. It's standard manipulation. From somewhere in the gathering crowd came an audible gasp. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her small frame vibrating with barely contained fury. As the elementary school principal, she had overseen Ethan's education plan personally. You disgust me, she said simply. Then she knelt beside Ethan, her voice dropping to the gentle tone used by those familiar with sensory processing disorders. Ethan, sweetheart, would you like to go to the quiet tent? Mr. Chen set it up by the oak tree just like at school. Ethan couldn't answer. His system was too overwhelmed to process language. He had retreated into himself, to the place his occupational therapist called his internal safety room. Sarah recognized the 1,000-yard stare. My emergency kit is in the car, she told Mrs. Chen. His weighted blanket and noise-canceling headphones are there. I'll get them. Mr. Gonzalez volunteered instantly, holding out his hand for the keys. Veronica watched this coordinated response with growing indignation. Her audience was shifting attention away from her, focusing instead on the child she'd struck. This wasn't how she'd imagined this confrontation unfolding. This is exactly the problem with our society, she declared loudly, trying to recapture control of the narrative. Everyone coddles and accommodates instead of teaching discipline and planetary respect. Do you know how many acres of rainforest were destroyed to make that burger? David took one deliberate step toward her. My son, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, cannot eat your approved foods without aspirating. He would literally choke to death on most plant proteins because of his muscular control issues. His medication requires certain nutrients to be effective. Not that any of that matters, because you have absolutely no right to dictate what anyone eats, let alone assault a child over it. Assault is a very serious accusation. Veronica's tone shifted, something calculating entering her expression. I'm on the board of the Parkview Legal Association. My husband is a partner at. Save it for court, Sarah interrupted, her phone still recording. Because I promise you, this is going there. She turned her back on Veronica to focus entirely on her son, dismissing the woman as irrelevant compared to Ethan's needs. Officer Ramirez arrived at that moment, taking in the scene with professional efficiency. His own brother's special needs had taught him to recognize sensory overload. Rather than barging in with questions, he created a buffer between the growing crowd and the family, motioning his partner to move Veronica away from the epicenter. Ma'am, I need you to step over here with my partner, he said firmly to Veronica. Sir, ma'am, he addressed the Millers. When your son is stabilized, I'll need statements, but there's no rush. Take care of him first. Veronica's face contorted with disbelief. You're not arresting them. Their child was eating a dead animal at a community event. I was enforcing. Ma'am, Officer Ramirez cut her off. Right now I'm seeing a child in distress after an apparent physical altercation. Please move aside so medical assistance can reach him. The mention of medical assistance seemed to penetrate Veronica's righteous bubble. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. As Jennifer Okafor reviewed the evidence in the Miller's living room, her professional demeanor occasionally gave way to flashes of maternal outrage. A stack of business cards from other attorneys who had reached out sat untouched on the coffee table. The case had attracted significant attention in legal circles. The ADA violations alone are substantial, Jennifer explained, highlighting sections of her notes. Veronica, as an HOA officer, attempted to deny reasonable accommodation, for a documented medical condition. That's textbook discrimination. David leaned forward. We don't want this to become a circus. Ethan's been through enough. Jennifer nodded. I understand completely. We can request privacy orders, limited media access, and closed hearings. My priority is protecting Ethan while establishing precedent that might help other families. Behind them, through the kitchen window, they could see Ethan in the backyard with the Patel children. They had created an elaborate game that somehow incorporated his wheelchair as a command center for their space mission. His laughter drifted in, a sound that had been worryingly absent in the days immediately following the incident. We've received 11 messages from local restaurants offering to cater special meals for Ethan, Sarah mentioned, scrolling through her phone. People we've never even met. Jennifer smiled. Communities often show their best selves after someone shows their worst. Speaking of which, she pulled up a series of screenshots on her tablet. Veronica's been busy online. The screenshots revealed Veronica's increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative. Her initial posts, claiming victimhood had evolved into convoluted conspiracy theories about big meat influencing local politics. Her followers, once numerous, had dwindled to a handful of commenters, mostly accounts from outside their community. She's been calling my expert witnesses disability industry profiteers, Jennifer said, unable to hide her disgust, including Dr. Ramirez, who hasn't charged the Millers full price for Ethan's care in 3 years. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Chen stood on the porch, holding a thick folder. The board has completed our internal investigation, he said, handing the folder to David. We've documented 27 separate instances where Veronica exceeded her authority or misrepresented board decisions. The evidence suggests a pattern of using HOA leadership to impose her personal preferences on residents. Inside the folder was a notarized letter of apology from the board, along with confirmation that they had amended the HOA bylaws to explicitly prohibit discrimination based on medical conditions or disabilities. We've also initiated a full audit of HOA finances, Mr. Chen added quietly. There are discrepancies in the landscaping budget that coincide with renovations to Ms. Hartman's backyard garden. As Mr. Chen departed, Sarah's phone chimed with a news alert. The local station was running a segment on HOA overreach and disability rights. The thumbnail showed Veronica's face from the video, frozen in the moment of self-righteous fury. They're interviewing disability advocates, Sarah noted, skimming the article. No mention of Ethan specifically. Jennifer nodded approvingly. Good. I pushed them to focus on the systemic issues rather than exploiting your son's experience. Outside, the Patel children were teaching Ethan a new game. Their patient explanations and accommodations for his mobility needs seamless and unforced. Mrs. Patel watched from her porch, occasionally calling encouragement in her musical accent. The saddest part, David mused, watching the children play, is that if Veronica had simply approached us privately with concerns about dietary options at community events, we probably would have worked with her to ensure inclusive menus. Ethan's actually quite interested in trying new foods when they're introduced appropriately. People like Veronica aren't interested in collaboration, Jennifer responded, closing her legal pad. They need the performance, the conflict. It was never really about the food. A text message lit up Sarah's phone. Mrs. Gonzalez asking if Ethan might be interested in joining their family for the children's symphony this weekend. He had mentioned enjoying music during one of his visits, and they had access to a sensory-friendly seating area. These small gestures of inclusion had become daily occurrences. The community that had sometimes felt indifferent to their challenges was now actively reaching out, educating themselves, finding ways to incorporate Ethan that respected both his needs and his dignity.